I'm educational justice coach Lindsay Lyons, and here on the Time for Teachership podcast, we learn how to inspire educational innovation for racial and gender justice, design curricula grounded in student voice, and build capacity for shared leadership. I'm a former teacher leader turned instructional coach. I'm striving to live a life full of learning, running, baking, traveling, and parenting because we can be rockstar educators and be full human beings. If you're a principal, assistant superintendent, curriculum director, instructional coach, or teacher who enjoys nerding out about co-creating curriculum with students, I made this show for you. Here we go. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Time for Teachership podcast. This is episode 236. And today we're talking about approaching current event conversations with your kid at home as part of a month-long family series to support families in thinking about how to support kids in all sorts of things, current events topics, how to discuss politics or quote unquote controversial issues, social studies content they may be learning about in school, ELA book themes that are emerging from books they're reading in school, interpersonal conflict, conflict with friends, conflict with family members, conflict at school or with the institution of schooling or with a specific teacher, other life things like what's going on with their bodies as they go through adolescence, like whatever the thing is that you want to talk about with your kiddos, we want to support you in talking about that thing with your kiddos. And so let's dive into today's episode and keep in mind, again, it's going to be a month-long series. And I think, we'll see how everyone feels, but I would like to bring it back as a recurring series as well, because we want to support holistically everyone in a child's life, not just educators, but families as well, so that we can truly partner as a family-school partnership. So let's dive in. Kids need us to talk to them. Otherwise, they're going to find other places to go. Basically, I'm talking about online spaces that are unsafe, that might radicalize children. And there is going to be a link in the blog post version of this podcast episode to some research. It's summarized nicely in an NEA Today article, so I'll link that one. But the person being interviewed here in this, Amra Sabek Al-Reyes, says when educators fail to engage students on issues that matter to them, students will look elsewhere. And I say this a lot in terms of education and teachers, but I also want to say it to family members, right? I think wherever we can have conversations in spaces that we perceive as relatively safe, in spaces where we have a sense of belonging or we are connected emotionally, relationally to others, that's the space that the kids are going to have the most ability to be honest, to be curious, to really investigate what they're feeling or thinking, think about what others in the conversation might be feeling or thinking, and have like authentic, real, honest conversations that get at truth and preserve humanity. Online spaces do not always do that. And in fact, many are predatory. Many communities are used as kind of hubs, like YouTube or TikTok are used as hubs to radicalize, particularly young boys. I think there's a lot of research on that. But I would imagine everyone who does not feel a sense of belonging and an opportunity for conversation in spaces in their daily lives, their families or their school systems. And so they turn somewhere for those conversations and ultimately are harmed, right? Or are harming others or both, right? So keeping all of that research in mind and knowing that we want to create spaces for real conversation where students can explore and children can explore what they're thinking and feeling, let's talk about some practical entry points. So I've been thinking a lot about kind of like a head, heart, hands model that has been present in education, and people have talked about this with teachers a lot. When we talk about, the whole child and the head, heart, hands elements of just, being a human. Right? Let's kind of use that framework to approach the conversation. I think often, not always, I will caveat this, not always, but often it may be easier to start with just like name the feeling. So how are you feeling about this is a question that you could ask a child, right? They bring up a topic or even you bring up a topic. There's like, hey, I noticed this was happening or I saw this in the news. Like, how are you feeling about this? And obviously all of these questions are dependent on the age of the child, but I will say that they're generally applicable with some modification or selecting particular questions from this list that we'll go through all ages, like preschool to college. And so I think about, I want you to think about, whatever kiddo your age currently is as you're listening to this or engaging with this blog post, what would work best for your kid and then go from there. But generally name the feelings. How are you feeling? If you can name the feeling,
And if you can't, or even if you can, it's also an interesting companion question, I think, to think about where in your body do you physically feel it. So sometimes I can't name the emotion, but I can say, "Ooh, I feel that in my stomach. Like I feel that in my gut. My gut is like churning. My stomach feels like it's on a roller coaster. It's flipped upside down, right?" Or, "Wow, my head hurts even trying to think about that intellectually is like what like I'm so confused or kind of in a disorienting dilemma, as the change researchers say. You know, my head hurts." Or I'm feeling like I maybe my fingers are tingling, like I'm really energized to like do something physically, like I want to make change happen, or whatever the thing is, right? So you might be able to anchor in where in your body you're feeling it, and then a kid might be able to identify how they're feeling, like name a emotion. But I think name the feelings first. You could ask students and children about their values. I say students because I'm always talking to educators, even when I'm talking to families. Children, students, identify your values. So, for example, okay, the topic has been broached. Why is this important to you? So, if a child brought it up to you, why is this important? Or how might it go against or support a value of yours? So, I know you value, you know your kids, or you can invite them to name what they value. But, I know you value honesty. You really think it's important that me and your friends and your family are honest with you. So, how does this, relate to honesty, right? Or how does it violate honesty? Oh, someone lied to you. Oh, I know honesty is a core value of yours. Gosh, that's really frustrating. I can see why this is important to you. Right. So, again, as much as they can lead the conversation, great. And then at times you may want to jump in and kind of, in that example that I just went through, kind of help them along or model for the first kind of time you're thinking through this. And you'll all find your way, right? We're learning this as they're learning, and we're all learning how to engage together. So those are some heart questions, right? Name the feelings, identify your core values. We could also get into some head questions. So literally ask the question, what questions do you have? So, ooh, yeah, I saw that on the news. What questions do you have about that? Or I heard that, yeah, you and your two friends got into an argument at lunch today. Like, what questions do you have about that? Or the school made this new policy. Ooh, I bet there's a lot of questions that are coming up for you. Like, do you want to share some of them? You also can engage the head by thinking critically. So, what might be the underlying need? So, maybe you're talking about a quote unquote controversial issue where there's kind of a polarization of two sides or two political parties, maybe in the news around a legal issue or some sort of policy initiative. So, you might invite them to think critically. And again, think about what age they are, but what might be the underlying need? What does that person maybe need? That person who's pushing that policy, or that person who demanded that thing or took that action, like what did they need? Like, what do you think that they were missing or feeling like they didn't have? What were they trying to get through that action, right? So, again, scaling for language based on how old your kid is or how ready they are to engage with this. You could also do this with an ELA text, right? Oh, you're reading a story in your class. Yeah, that character took that action. That's interesting. You might be reading the book along with them, so you might have a little bit more insight into all of these pieces. But what might be a reason why that person did that, right? What might they need? What might that person value, right? So, kind of at a higher level, high school level, I always talk about like safety versus freedom is a very big kind of like both needs are necessary or both values are necessary for society. We want to have safety, we want to have freedom. So, in a conversation about gun control, right? Like, okay, so this person seems to be valuing safety. Well, safety is really important. This person seems to be valuing freedom. Freedom is really important. Like, where, and then that's an entry point, right, to the conversation. Where can we find an optimal balance? What's a good balance between those two things? What does that look like for you, right? Okay, we also can engage the hands in the conversation. And again, I say the heart isn't easiest, and I go heart to head to hands, like just how I work, but other kids might want to start with the hands and then kind of bounce around like to head to heart and, enter wherever your kiddos are. So hands, maybe think about what can we do as a family to take action about this? So this is really upsetting you. Is there anything I can do or we can do together? Is there anything you can do in your local community that you can think of? How could we address this problem, right? If it's a social issue, for example. Often I find that it's helpful to support a local community initiative versus to kind of start your own. There's usually something in your local area that is already in existence that you can contribute to or volunteer at or contribute money to or raise awareness of through whatever relational or social media platforms you have. You could rate an op-ed so you can kind of process your feelings with your kiddo. And then, particularly if they're younger, you could be the person writing it, or the kiddo could be the person writing it if they're older, then publish that or send that to a local outlet. You can also just explore or brainstorm creative solutions. So if you're not quite ready to take that step to action, or you're just not even sure maybe what that action looks like, or all of the action plans that seem in front of you just feel like they don't quite meet the mark, and you're like, I think there's something different we should do to actually do something that hasn't been done before, or creatively think about an approach to this problem, then you could just simply, hang out in the explore or brainstorm creative solutions phase first. So that might mean reading together. I often like sci-fi and fantasy novels as a way to open up conversation about what is possible, because often they break free of the realistic constraints of our everyday society and they come up with some amazing ideas, right? And then we just have to think about, how do we bring those to real life? How can we take elements of that? What do we like about that? We could also just dream, right? Just like dream up what that could look like, and create our own, short stories or novels if you're very ambitious, and kind of like creatively dream up what is possible without the confines of reality, because art is also really important. And that's another way you could do it, right? It doesn't always have to be writing. It could be drawing, painting, some sort of art and creative art project where we're envisioning the possible together through art.
Hi, this is Leah popping in to share the free resource for this episode, Staying Engaged in Difficult Conversations handout. You can find it at the blog post for this episode, www.lindsaybethlyons.com/blog/236. Now back to the show.
Now, I had an awesome conversation with Dr. Laura Lipton, who was the co-author of Groups at Work, a book that we featured on this podcast earlier. And we talked particularly to teacher leaders in school systems. But I want to bring a strategy that they recommended in their book to this conversation, because I think one of the hardest things, right, we said this at the top of the episode, I said this, invite students to think about the questions that they have. So if you ask your child, what questions do you have about this? That, in my experience, particularly with the investigating history curriculum implementation in Massachusetts this past year in school year 24-25, that was one of the hardest things that the researchers at Tufts University, part of the Circle Project, found in their research of this curriculum implementation around grades 3 and 4 specifically, but also grades 5 through 7. Generating questions for kiddos was one of the hardest inquiry-based routines to do out of all of them. So looking at hard sources, like, yeah, that was hard, but actually not as hard as creating questions. Synthesizing, putting it together, making a claim, that was hard, but not as hard as generating questions. And I think about, all the research for, 3-year-olds, for example, ask however many it is now, I can't even remember, 300 questions a day or something like that. And after a lot of schooling and society, and let's be honest, I will raise my hand here to say that as parents, we can't always answer all of the questions. So through all of that lived experience, students and children kind of slow down the questioning, and it actually becomes really hard once they get older. And so knowing that, you may want to think about an approach to inviting questions or modeling questions for your kiddos so that they are more able to do something like that. So here is a strategy that Dr. Laura Lipton suggested. So it's called color question brainstorming. And I can envision this at, like a dinner table or something with a family, where you have like 2 or 3 people or more, kind of taking turns in rounds here. So brainstorming, they suggest a group of 4. So if you can, great, group of 4. If you can't, whoever you have. And you're going to list kind of all of your questions based on these 3 color categories. And then you're going to highlight the most relevant questions. So there's a little bit of critical thinking as kind of a part 2. But the first part is to write questions on these 3 categories. Green. Green questions are about imagination and possibility. So a nice sentence starter for a question that's green might be, what might happen if, right? What might happen if this policy gets pushed through, right? What might happen if we, contribute to this local community initiative, right? Next color is red. Red questions are facts, figures, or data. So question sentence starters here might be how many or how much, right? How many people have been affected by this social issue? How much money will this cost our city or town to invest in this cool project that I dreamed up? Blue questions are opinions, values, or needs. So why is this? What's the best way to? Our question sentence starters here. So why is this important to me? Why is this important to that person, right? What's the best way to address this issue? what's the best way to hear from and gather input from many community members to make an action plan to move forward, right? So again, this is color question brainstorming from Dr. Laura Lippman and Bruce Wellman. And the categories are green for imagination and possibility, red for facts, figures, and data, and blue for opinions, values, and needs. And this is awesome because they're all different types of thinking. Your brain is activated in different ways. I can even actually see them now, literally as I'm recording this. I did not think about this prior to, to talking through this in this moment, but it actually, I think, mirrors some of the head, heart, hands as well. Like, what kind of things are you talking about? Are you in your head, like the red, facts, figures, data? Are you in your heart where you're thinking about the blue, kind of opinions, values, needs? Are you in the green of like taking action with your hands? Like, what's the imagination or possibility? Oh, that's so funny. Okay, well, there we go. It all comes back together. So as you have these conversations, if you get stuck, I just want to say, as a kind of final piece here, it is okay if you get stuck, if you don't know what to say. If you just want to take a minute and say, hey, I'd love to talk more about this with you. I'm not sure what to say here. Just be truly transparent and honest. Say, I need to do a little research, or I need to think on that. That's a great question. Come back to it. You can always do that. In fact, I will link a free resource that we developed for a nursery school, actually for a preschool, and for the family members there. It's called Staying Engaged in Difficult Conversations. It's a quick handout, so feel free to reference any of the tips on that sheet. You'll find that at today's blog post, lindsaybethlyons.com/blog/236. I also want to say, we are opening EduBoost, our Slack-based coaching community for educators, up to families, and we're super excited about it. So me and my colleague, Kara Pranikoff, are here for you. If you have any questions and you get stuck, you want to return to the conversation, you want to even take a brief 5-minute pause from the conversation and Slack us and see if we're on in that moment, we'll get back to you in 24 hours with a response or relevant resources for your question. So families, we are here for you. Let's keep supporting one another. I'm so excited to learn more about how these conversations are going at home with you and your kiddo. And stay tuned for the remainder of this month's series on families.
If you're looking for support to help you talk to your child about history, current events, or other high emotion topics, we've got you. Families are now welcome to join EduBoost. Here's how it works. Your kid brings up a topic and you're not sure what to say next, or something happens in the world or in your kid's life and you want to talk to your kid about it, but you're unsure how to bring it up. Immediately, you send us a message on Slack telling us what's going on via text or audio message. Slack can be used on your phone as well as your computer, so you can totally message us from the grocery store checkout line or at 2 a.m. when your question is literally keeping you awake at night. You get a personalized response and any relevant resources within 24 hours from me or my awesome colleague, Kara Pranikoff. Visit lindsaybethlyons.com/families for more information on family coaching.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at www.teachbetterpodcastnetwork.com. We'll see you on the next episode.